Picture this. It's Super Bowl 2025. 100 million Americans are watching Harrison Ford cozy in a mountain lodge talking about freedom and American spirit, while footage of World War II Jeeps flickers across their screens. The commercial cost millions, of course it did. It was the Super Bowl, and the message behind it was powerful. But the commercial, acting as a symbol of American liberty and power, wasn't actually a celebration of success. This was a desperate attempt to resurrect a dying brand. Now, the story has all of the fascinating markers of a juicy saga. There's the multi-billion-dollar family dynasty behind it, corporate missteps, leadership scuffles, and much more. I'm Sammi Cohen, and this is Social Currency, a podcast that unpacks the stories that are shaping business, culture, and the intersection of the two. So this episode is coming to you because of very popular demand. I posted a video on Instagram and TikTok a few weeks ago where I talked about this Jeep situation, and people wanted more. There is so much that I couldn't go into in the shorter form content, so just settle in because we are going to get into all of it. We are dissecting one of the most shocking corporate collapses of our time, the systematic destruction of Jeep, one of America's most iconic automotive brands. Now, to create some context as to how Jeep has fallen, in the year 2000, Jeep's share of the American SUV market was at 13%. Now, flashing forward to last year, sales fell for a sixth consecutive year. A brand that survived World War II, multiple recessions, and countless ownership changes could not survive the mismanagement and series of poor decisions that had been made, especially given the competition in this space that started taking its market share. This is the story of how corporate greed, cultural ignorance, and strategic blindness killed an American legend. And trust me, you are going to want to listen to this full episode. Let's start with the reality of what happened to Jeep. In July 2024, Stellantis, the conglomerate that owns Jeep, reported that their net income had been cut almost in half. For a company that was once valued at $93 billion, this is equal to a fire alarm at full blast. This is as serious as it can get. Now, I want to pause to talk about the ownership of Stellantis for a second. Stellantis is the global automaker who is behind not just Jeep, but they also own countless other makes. There's Dodge, Ram, Maserati, etc. Stellantis was the company that was formed in a 2021 merger, with John Elkann as the key decision maker and head of the billionaire family behind it. The family that I'm speaking about is the Agnelli family, and Bloomberg has called them Italy's version of the Kennedy clan. Now, John's great-great-grandfather founded Fiat in 1899 and made the family very wealthy through that business. So now John, the one running Stellantis today, actually runs a family-controlled holding company in the Netherlands called Exor. Exor had around 48 billion euros in net assets at the end of 2024. And the Agnelli family has a stake valued at around 10 billion euros. So now John finds himself in a position where he manages not only just his own fortune, but the fortune of his family. And it's all on him to protect the family's car empire and ensure that it can survive despite the growing competition throughout the industry, especially from China and the global push towards electric. And one more note on John. He has forged friendships with many of Silicon Valley's most notable names. Just to name a few, there's Jeff Bezos and Sam Altman. And he himself has diversified away from just focusing on the auto business. He has also diversified investments across luxury, healthcare, and tech. Back to Stellantis. Jeep was once their crown jewel in the auto business, yet the brand is nowhere near where it once was. John now has to figure out how to put the right people in place at Jeep in order to turn things around. But let's get into what actually happened at Jeep. Carlos Tavares, the CEO of Stellantis behind the declining sales, meant well. This isn't a corporate sabotage. This is just a series of poor choices, and in fact, these decisions were so poor that I can guarantee that this will one day be a business school case study. Tavares did understand that the auto market was moving towards electrification. He laid out a careful plan to invest over 30 billion euros to electrify Stellantis and build battery factories. He started cutting what he deemed to be unnecessary costs. And initially, everything seemed to be working, and Stellantis even put up a 12% margin that first year, which was great. However, it quickly became clear that Tavares didn't have a great understanding of the US market, and he didn't really seem to want to listen to his executive team about what would work well in the US market. So when interest rates rose, he jacked up Jeep prices while gutting the product lineup, which is a terrible combination. He temporarily discontinued the Cherokee, a midsize SUV that was the heart of Jeep's volume sales, just to move production to Mexico and save on labor costs. Over 4 years, he laid off over 50,000 people across the entire company. And soon their share of the American SUV market collapsed. Meanwhile, competitors like Ford's Bronco, the boxy Wrangler rival, swooped in to capture the customers that Jeep was abandoning. By September 2024, Jeep dealers were so fed up that they actually sent an open letter to Tavares accusing him of destroying the company's brand. When your own dealers are publicly calling you out, you know that you've messed up in a massive way. But don't you worry about Carlos Tavares. The golden parachute came in to make sure he was well taken care of. Despite the catastrophic performance, Tavares walked away with a $27 million payout when he was finally ousted in December of last year. Now, I want to talk about the cultural ramifications here. Jeep isn't just any car brand. It's embedded in American culture in ways that are almost mythical. Jeep owners leave rubber ducks on each other's hoods as acts of good karma. They wave to each other on the road with a special two-finger Jeep wave. It's this if you know type of communication that creates a lore within the Jeep owner community, and it feels really special. That type of community is so hard to build, especially around an auto brand. This is the kind of emotional connection that should make a brand bulletproof, but Tavares and his team completely misunderstood what they were dealing with. And here's the core problem. Jeep is fundamentally about authenticity and ruggedness, but Tavares tried to turn it into a luxury cash cow. So in 2021, they launched the Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer, 3-row luxury SUVs that topped out above $100,000. They took a rugged car and they tried to turn it into a luxury land yacht. And then they also had a massive opportunity that they absolutely fumbled with the release of the Gladiator model in 2020. They could have created the messaging around this car to be the ultimate off-roading vehicle and tied it back to the core Jeep values that resonated with its core demographic. But once again, they priced this vehicle way too high and they tried to make it into more of a lifestyle car that was higher upmarket than it should have been. And when that move upmarket backfired, Jeep didn't have enough competitive mainstream models to fall back on. The Grand Cherokee and entry-level Compass were badly outdated. They'd created a massive hole in the heart of the SUV market, and competitors rushed to fill it. Ford Broncos really took the place of what Americans wanted from Jeep, and Ford sales have proven that they are running away with this. And the man was literally hollowing out the soul of the brand while obsessing over profit margins. He turned a cultural icon into a corporate spreadsheet exercise. Much of the Jeep product offensive was delayed. Some models were delayed by months, others by years. The delays worsened an already deteriorating financial picture and created a vicious cycle. There was poor execution, which led to lower sales, which then led to more cost cutting, which then led to even worse execution. And then the cherry on top was Trump's trade war, which Tavares was completely unprepared for, as was the rest of the world. When Trump imposed 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico in early 2025, Stellantis executives scrambled to estimate the size of their tariff bills. The much anticipated return of the Cherokee, now made in Mexico, was completely derailed because its supply chain had to be reworked to minimize the tariff costs. And the less expensive Compass was about to get a refresh at a plant in Canada, but they paused the launch, creating panic among Canadian officials. By April 2025, Stellantis suspended its financial guidance for the entire year, citing tariff uncertainty. The CFO later said that trade duties would cost them $1.5 billion, roughly 27% of their 2024 net profit. So let's shift gears to what happened once Stellantis finally fired Tavares in December 2024. When they went to go get a replacement CEO, they couldn't find anyone who actually wanted the job. John Elkann, the billionaire chairman, spent 6 months scouring the globe for a unicorn CEO. They needed someone who understood manufacturing and retail, had a vision for electric vehicles, could navigate geopolitical tensions, and somehow turn around a company that was losing billions. They tried to lure external candidates from Hyundai, GM, and Renault. But guess what? by the time they reached out, no one was willing to step up to the plate. And if you think about this, it's a tough sell to walk into a house that's burning, and not many people want to inherit that kind of disaster. So after 6 months of searching, they gave up and promoted Antonio Filosa internally. Filosa had successfully run Stellantis' South American division and had been with the company for 26 years. But let's be honest, his appointment was basically the team coming to terms with the fact that outside talent didn't want to take on these massive problems. Meanwhile, Elkann has been playing diplomat, trying to mend fences with politicians in Italy, France, and the US. He even made a $1 million donation to Trump's inauguration fund and promised over $5 billion in new investment. But after years of mismanagement, it's going to take a lot more than money to fix this mess. So let's get into my predictions. Where does Jeep go from here? Here is exactly what I'm thinking. First, brand surgery is coming. Elkann has already hired McKinsey to develop strategies for struggling brands like Alfa Romeo and Maserati. Don't be surprised if some of Stellantis' weaker brands get sold off or shut down to focus resources on Jeep and Ram. Second, the luxury experiment is over. The Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer will either be repositioned or quietly discontinued. Jeep will return to its roots: authentic, capable, and accessible. The Cherokee's return is crucial, and they need to fill that mainstream SUV gap immediately. And third, there will be more internal power struggles. The company is already shifting focus from Paris back to Detroit and Italy. The French influence that protected Tavares is waning, and American and Italian executives are reasserting their control. But here's my biggest prediction. Jeep will survive, but Stellantis doesn't last in its current form. The conglomerate is too unwieldy, too political, and too unfocused. I expect significant restructuring and possibly even a breakup within the next 3 years. Jeep's brand equity is still massive and way too valuable to let die, but it's going to take years to rebuild trust with dealers, customers, and employees. The question isn't whether Jeep can be saved. It's whether the people now in charge have learned from Tavares' catastrophic mistakes, and can they be disciplined enough to really get back to what their core customers loved about them in the first place. And that is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please drop a comment to let me know your thoughts on today's episode, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Social Currency. I've been wanting to launch this show for so long. I can't tell you how excited I am to do this and how thrilled I am that you're actually here listening. It means the world to me. If you liked what you heard today, please rate and review the podcast because it massively helps to support the work I do to bring the show to life. And if you want to keep up with the hottest business lore in real time, follow me on Instagram at Sammi Cohen Talks and subscribe to my newsletter, Social Currency, which is linked in the show notes. Social Currency is a production of Social Currency Media and Money News Network. The podcast is hosted and executive produced by me, Sammi Cohen. Social Currency is produced by the Money News Network team. See you next time.